Today on Steelers Talk, I'm going to tell you why new Steelers wide receiver Van Jefferson is already on the hot seat after a not-so-great performance in Week 1 versus Atlanta. Then I'll go into 3 new Steelers wide receiver trade targets that Bleacher Report named earlier today. Then I'll go into an interesting Justin Fields stat from Week 1 that I think every Steelers fan should know. And then I'll get into whether or not the Steelers should consider keeping Dan Moore Jr. as the starting left tackle for the entirety of the 2024 NFL season. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. We are the largest individually run Steelers news channel here on YouTube. We're approaching 60,000 subscribers, so thank you guys for all of your support. And with that, let's get into the content. So before we get into our Steelers content today, I do want to bring a little bit of awareness. It is September 11th today, and of course this is a very important day in the history of the United States of America, and I just wanted to say that we will never forget today's date, September 11th, 2001. That day really changed the fabric of our country forever, and it showed that no matter what happens, this country will always stay united. So spam USA down there in the comments section to show your national pride. I really do appreciate all of your guys' support. We live in the best country in the world here in the United States of America, and together we are stronger united. So make sure you spam those USAs to show your national pride today. And with that, let's get into the content here. And the first thing I want to talk about here is that the secondary wide receivers for the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 1 versus Atlanta were non-existent. It was pretty much George Pickens, and then Pat Freiermuth had a couple of decent receptions for first downs, and then that was about it. Van Jefferson, who this team raved about during training camp, had some pretty decent performances in the preseason as well, only had 1 catch for 1 yard. I mean, that is a freaking joke of a stat line there from Van Jefferson. And then other guys didn't do much better. Of course, Roman Wilson was out with that ankle injury, and Calvin Austin III had only 1 catch himself for 7 yards on the day. Now, the thing that really bothered me about Jefferson, because, you know, he was brought in as kind of a bigger receiver. He's 6'1", 200 pounds. He was supposed to be somebody that could run block in this Arthur Smith system. Well, he was one of the worst run blocking wide receivers in the National Football League in Week 1. He was an utter failure in this regard, leaving yards on the table for the Pittsburgh Steelers run game. A 39.5 Pro Football Focus run block grade. Absolutely abysmal. That is what he is here to do. At least with Allen Robinson, he was invisible as a receiver, but he was legitimate as a run blocker. Van Jefferson was neither in Week 1, which is absolutely why he is on the hot seat already in his Steelers tenure. He needs to get it going, either as a receiver, as a blocker, or both, or somebody is going to replace him in this offense, whether that's Calvin Austin III, whether that's Roman Wilson, whether that's Pat Freiermuth as a tight end becoming this number 2 receiving option, whether that be go out and trading for a receiver. We'll talk about some options later in today's show, but it's not like anybody else other than Van Jefferson was getting the job done either. It was pretty much George Pickens and nobody else. Calvin Austin III was pretty invisible as well, with just 1 catch in his own right. Now, I do think Calvin Austin III maybe wasn't a part of the progressions as much, because it was a lot of 1 read to check down and 1 read to running the football for Justin Fields. It was a very simple game plan for him, so maybe Calvin wasn't as much in the progressions, but somebody's got to step up here and somebody's got to emerge as the number 2 receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers this season, whether that's Van Jefferson with a bounce-back performance this week, whether that's Calvin Austin III, whether that's Roman Wilson whenever he eventually returns from that ankle injury, whether that's trading for somebody. Someone needs to show up, and somebody needs to really be a legitimate number 2 receiving option opposite George Pickens. So now let's talk about some options here in terms of what the Steelers could do in a trade for a wide receiver. Let's say, Van Jefferson isn't it, Calvin Austin III isn't it, they still don't believe Roman Wilson is ready to take on that number 2 receiver mantle. What are some options that the Steelers could do right now to go and make this team better? Well, let's talk about what Bleacher Report had to say here. Number 3, this is one that we've talked about on the show before, Treylon Burks. Now, of course, Tennessee traded away A.J. Brown, and they immediately replaced him with Treylon Burks with the pick that they got in exchange for A.J. there with the Philadelphia Eagles. He hasn't really turned out. He didn't really play all that much in Week 1, and I think he's definitely gettable on the trade market. This is what Kristopher Knox from Bleacher Report had to say about Treylon Burks. In Tennessee's season opener, Burks carried the ball twice for 1 yard and recorded a 2-yard reception. While he doesn't appear poised to become a significant piece in the Titans' offensive game plan. He has untapped potential that other franchises might covet. Now, for the Pittsburgh Steelers, if they want to go out and trade for Treylon Burks, the obvious pros here is that he's affordable. He's on his rookie contract. He's going to cost nothing in a trade. I have a 6th-round value for him. He's got yak ability. He's got the size to be a really good run blocker. I think he's a really good scheme fit overall in terms of his skill set in the Steelers offense that likes bigger receivers that can make plays after the catch and can run block. But the cons are, I don't think the short area quickness is all that good for him. Not sure the long speed is actually all that great. It takes a while for him to really get going with the long speed and stuff like that. And the route running is not refined, which is why he hasn't had the kind of success you want to see from a 1st-round pick in the NFL to this point. So personally, I'm lower on Treylon Burks. If I'm trading for him, I'm probably only offering a 7th-round pick, and that's it. But I think if the Steelers end up trading for him, the Titans will only take a 6th-round pick in exchange for him. So coming up here on Steelers Talk, 2 more wide receiver trade targets to discuss from Bleacher Report on today's show. Plus, I'll get into the latest injury updates surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers. But before we get into that, let's have word from our sponsor here at Z-Biotics. And guys, we all have busy lives these days and can't afford to waste a day stuck on the couch because of a few drinks the night before, especially during football season, right? You do some drinking on Sunday, enjoying the Steelers game, and then the next morning you don't feel as good. Z-Biotics pre-alcohol is the answer you guys have all been waiting for. Pre-alcohol is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic, which means it is invented by a PhD scientist to tackle rough mornings after drinking. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down in your gut. Just remember to drink this probiotic before drinking alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's sleep to feel your best on Victory Monday. As you guys know, I don't drink alcohol, but I work with people who do here at Chat Sports, especially on NFL Sundays. And let me tell you, working with Coop on Monday after he drinks this pro alcohol on Sunday mornings makes my life a whole lot easier. And what you're going to get when you order pre-alcohol from Z-Biotics, you're going to get this really nice package here, and it comes with 6 vials of pre-alcohol. I can't get it open right now, but there's 6 bottles in here. You drink it before you start drinking on Sundays or whenever you start drinking, and then it pretty much that byproduct in your gut protects you from all the adverse effects, let's call it, the morning after. So see for yourself today when you go to zbiotics.com/chatsports. You can also scan the QR code on the screen right now to get 15% off your first order when you use Chat Sports as the code at checkout. You can also sign up for a subscription using my code so you can stay prepared no matter the time or occasion. Z-Biotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head on over to zbiotics.com/chatsports and use code CHATSPORTS. It's one word, all caps, CHATSPORTS. It's right down there in the bottom of your screen right now at checkout for 15% off. Thank you to Z-Biotics for sponsoring today's edition of Steelers Talk. Another wide receiver listed on Bleacher Report's list of trade candidates at this point after week 1 is Robert Woods. And we've talked about Bobby Trees quite a bit on the show here as a potential option for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is what Kristopher Knox has to say about the former Ram and now Texan. The Texans are poised to lean heavily on Nico Collins, Stefon Diggs, and Tank Dell, while Woods serves as depth. He played a mere 12 offensive snaps during Houston's week 1 win over the Indianapolis Colts. If Houston finds an opportunity to improve its roster at another position, Woods could be dangled as part of a trade package. Moving him would also save $6.5 million in cap for the Texans. So you take a look at the pros and cons of trading for Woods here. I do think you'd have to give up a player in exchange for Woods because, right now they did have to put Jeff Okudah, a depth cornerback, on the IR, so they could be in the market for a depth cornerback here if you're the Houston Texans. I do think he's a scheme fit. He is getting older, but he does bring experience, veteran veteran experience there. I don't think he's quite as athletic as he used to be, but he's a really good run blocker, and I do think he could be a serviceable wide receiver too if Van Jefferson just simply isn't it here in Pittsburgh. But like I said, I think that the downside to trading for Robert Woods is that the Texans are going to want a cornerback to replace Jeff Okudah in their rotation. I think that the best case scenario here is that they want Darius Rush, and he is a younger cornerback. I know the Steelers like his potential, so I'm not sure if Pittsburgh's going to be willing to do this. Take a look here. Steelers get Bobby Trees. Texans get Darius Rush in a 6th-round pick next year. So let me know down in the comment section, guys, if you guys like this trade at all. And then we get to the number 1 trade target here for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I should say, and it's Mr. Darius Slayton out of New York. The Giants did kind of give him some new money, some new incentives on their contract this year, but he's on the last year of his deal, and that team looks absolutely terrible to start this season, so he might be on the trade block. This is what Kristopher Knox has to say about Slayton and his availability. The Giants barely looked competitive during their 28-6 loss to the Minnesota Vikings in Week 1. They could quickly reach a point where they're clearly playing for next year. Slayton, who topped 700 receiving yards in 4 of his 5 seasons, could be an attractive in-season trade chip. And then specifically talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers here, he says the Steelers should consider adding a veteran wide receiver like Slayton to a group that lacks depth behind number 1 target George Pickens. In Week 1, Pickens led the Steelers with 85 receiving yards, while Calvin Austin III and Van Jefferson, the only other wide receivers to log receptions, combined for a measly 8 yards. So when it comes to Slayton, the pros are he's a really good route runner, so if you're trying to replace Deontay Johnson's role and what would have been Brandon Ayuk's role in this offense, Darius Slayton can certainly play that Z position in this Steelers offense. He'd be a solid number 2 right out of the box, but some of the cons, he's not a great run blocker throughout his career. He's graded relatively low in that department, so I'm not sure if Arthur Smith loves that aspect of his game. And then also he's looking for a new contract, if not right after getting traded, then after the season. I'm not sure if the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be willing to do that. And he's a little bit more expensive than some of the other guys that we mentioned on today's show already. I think it'd cost a 5th-round pick to get Darius Slayton. So take your pick down there in the comments section between these 3 wide receiver trade options. Which one are you taking, or are you waiting till the deadline for a bigger name like a Cortland Sutton, a DK Metcalf, or a Devontae Adams pops up? Type DS if you want Darius Slayton, type RW for Robert Woods, or type TB for Treylon Burks. And of course, type W if you want to wait to the deadline. So let's get into some of the latest Steelers injury updates here as we prepare for Week 2 versus the Denver Broncos. Let's start with Russell Wilson here because he is feeling better, but he is still considered day-to-day. He was limited in practice today. He's meeting with doctors and trainers throughout the week to evaluate his potential availability for Sunday. However, head coach Mike Tomlin did make it really seem like it was a big if that he was going to be healthy. I don't think the Steelers will play Russell Wilson unless he is 100% ready to go. It sounds like he won't be for Sunday, so it does feel like Justin Fields will once again start for the Pittsburgh Steelers Week 2 in Mile High Stadium against the Denver Broncos. And now, I did tell you guys there's an interesting stat that I wanted to talk about here when it came to Justin Fields and his Week 1 performance. So here is his passing chart here from Week 1, and a lot of people notice there's not a lot of throws in the middle of the field, and you're absolutely right about that. It's a lot of throws below 10 yards past the line of scrimmage. You can definitely tell by this chart the Pittsburgh Steelers played it extremely, extremely safe with Justin Fields based on this chart. But the thing that's interesting about this is that Justin Fields led the NFL in Week 1 in average time to throw. So even though he was pretty much a check down Charlie, except for just 4 throws that went past the 10-yard mark, past the line of scrimmage, he still held on to the ball for the longest period of time than any quarterback in the league. That tells us that he's not processing information very quickly. He has to see things get open before he's throwing it. And this is why I'm a little bit concerned about him being the long-term answer for this season as the starting quarterback. Now, he did show himself to be serviceable for the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? He hit some deep bombs down the field to George Pickens. He made some big-time runs as a rusher to help this team win that football game against the Atlanta Falcons. So if it comes to pass here that Russell Wilson stinks, or if Justin Fields keeps winning, absolutely. I'm comfortable with him as your starting quarterback because your defense is so damn good, and the run game and the offensive line played really well as well, so you're hoping that continues. So Justin Fields is certainly somebody that I think is limited at this point. The Steelers' game plan for him definitely showed that. His inability to get the ball out quickly, despite having really close to the line of scrimmage type throws, high percentage throws on his plate, is definitely a little bit concerning. But at the end of the day here, guys, the defense is awesome. The offensive line played well, and the run game was effective. So Justin Fields can certainly be the type of quarterback that has success with the Steelers in that type of environment. So let me know down there in the comments section, how many games will the Pittsburgh Steelers win this year if Justin Fields starts every game? For me personally, guys, I'm going to give an answer of 10 wins. I think this team can be a playoff team with Justin Fields as their quarterback. Now, could they get maybe a win or two more with Russell Wilson? I guess we'll have to see when he eventually hits the field. But Fields is certainly somebody that I think is a little bit limited, but can certainly be serviceable for this football team and get them to the postseason. So some more injury updates here before we say goodbye today. Darius Rush currently in concussion protocol. They're hoping that he's going to be able to play on Sunday in pass protocol before they line up against the Denver Broncos. Rowan Wilson returned to practice after missing pretty much the entirety of training camp, especially the padded portion of training camp with that ankle injury. With Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin III getting out to slow starts this year, I think the Steelers are going to be relying on him quite a bit to get healthy and to be productive right away. And then the last thing we'll talk about here is the offensive line. And Dan Moore Jr. is dealing with some ankle soreness this week. Did not practice today. Broderick Jones was the first team left tackle. Troy Fautano was the starting right tackle. So could we see Troy Fautano, the first-round rookie out of Washington, get his first start? Head coach Mike Tomlin said he is now fully healthy, ready to go in the event that he needs to make his first NFL start this week. He was on the bench as a rotation player last week against Atlanta. It was Dan Moore Jr. and Broderick Jones last week. And let's take a look at the PFF grades of all the starting offensive linemen for the Steelers. And it's pretty impressive, if I have to say so myself. Dan Moore Jr. was very impressive, man. 16th out of 67 offensive tackles with a 75.4 overall PFF grade. That was really, really good. Spencer Anderson played like a backup, but good enough, I would say. Zach Frazier really impressed me on film. He had multiple pancakes as a run blocker, and he was really sturdy as a pass protector like he was in the preseason. James Daniels was your highest graded offensive lineman, so he's solid. And then Broderick Jones, it's not fantastic on the right side still, but it was better than what we saw from him in the preseason. And you look at Dan Moore Jr. and what he was able to do in week one, man. He had an 88.7 pass protection or pass block grade according to Pro Football Focus. Now, PFF grading, it isn't gospel, all right, but you watch the film on Dan Moore Jr. through training camp, through preseason, and now in that week one performance. This is somebody that looks like a starting left tackle in the National Football League now. And if Broderick Jones continues to struggle, especially if he gives up a multiple sack game like he did against the Buffalo Bills in the preseason, you really have to think about keeping Dan Moore Jr. as your starting left tackle throughout the 2024 season because he's being solid, especially as a pass protector. I mean, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If he's maintaining this level of play where he's having like an 88.7 pass block grade and you end up benching this guy, especially for a guy like Broderick Jones who ends up struggling, just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You got to play your best players, especially in an offense like this that heavily depends on the offensive line play. So kudos to Dan Moore Jr. for getting a lot better this offseason, and it's definitely paying dividends, at least in week one. And then, I could certainly get used to seeing this, guys. The top pass blocking grades as an entire unit on the offensive line in week one. The Pittsburgh Steelers had the third highest grade for pass blocking in the entire National Football League. It gave Justin Fields a lot of time to throw, which led to a very efficient day for Justin. Hopefully the Pittsburgh Steelers can keep this up, especially when Isaac Seumalo returns from his injury in a couple of weeks. So fill in the blank for me down there in the comment section. The Steelers have a top blank offensive line in the NFL today. They were top 3 in pass blocking in week one. Right now, I'll say they're borderline top 10, especially whenever Isaac Seumalo returns from his injury. Also, in some final news here, Chris Boswell was named Special Teams Player of the Week in the AFC for week one. I think we all know it was coming because he had that emergency punt. He made 6 field goals, 3 of them from 50 plus. So spam those 9s for me down there in the comments section to show Chris Boswell some love. love today. Really good stuff from Chris. He was the MVP of Week 1 in my book, and he definitely deserves this award from the AFC. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button right now if you haven't already. Really do appreciate all of your support. I know today was a little bit of a longer one, guys, but I love going in depth with you guys every single day on the Black and Gold. We'll be back tomorrow with Steelers Talk Live. We got some fun stuff to show you guys tomorrow, so make sure you join us 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow for Steelers Talk Live.